Hey, thank you very much, Graham. I've got a couple of problems with the introduction already. One, he said I'm going to be an interesting speaker, and I've gone and prepared a particularly boring speech, so I didn't get that memo. And yeah, about the fame thing either, maybe only Crime Watch and possible, yeah, a little bit of that, but maybe, yeah, getting farms getting washed away and getting on the media for the wrong reasons possibly. But I thank you very much. It's great to be here. Look, I'll just tell you a little bit about what I do, where I'm from, really informal. I've got nothing written down or planned, I've just got a few photos. And so ask any questions you want to know and we'll take this talk wherever you want to go. And I'm not going to know the answers to a whole lot, but I'm just going to make the answers up or defer to someone who does. So, you know, it's, there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of passion and history in this room, and so you guys, there's a lot of people here who are going to know a lot of stories. Here we go. So Blue Duck Station, look, most of you know where it is, but on this map over here, we'll come and have a look at it a bit later on, but this is just a Google Earth photographs of Blue Duck, Retaruki River, running down to the Wanganui River, and Blue Duck Station is, g'day fellas, how you doing? Blue Duck Station is essentially 3,500 acres south of the Retaruki River. And my parents' station, Retaruki Station, is 3,500 acres north of the Retaruki River. So we've got 7,000 acres down there with the river running through, the Retaruki River running through the middle of it, and the Wanganui River being the boundary. And it's a pretty historic area for the Māori people, of course, being big villages there at Whakahoro. And there's 3 fortified pā sites there, which are, you know, amazing stories around those pā. And Taupanete Mamaku's buried there. You know, you can see his face on the wall of Te Papa, and what a wise-looking man he was. He's buried there still today. You've got the Kaiwhakauka pā site on the Wanganui River, which is probably renowned for a few things, but probably the site of the last major massacre in New Zealand, which came about when the Ngāpuhi had the big raid from the far north and came down because they had muskets, because one of their chiefs had gone overseas and came back with a lot of muskets, and they came right down the west coast of New Zealand all the way to Wellington, of course, and with their new firepower to beat up all their old enemies. And on the way back up after a pretty bloodthirsty campaign, half of the Ngāpuhi split and decided they were going to go up the Wanganui River and to carry on this destruction on all the enemies, and the other half were going to carry on home. Well, the half that went up the Wanganui River got to Retaruki, Whakahoro, and of course Pariatua here, which sits up above the Wanganui River and the Retaruki River right on the confluence, was a permanently manned Māori lookout. And up there they had a big drum, and they could see right down the Wanganui River 4 kilometres, and they'd always had someone up there keeping a watch out, because she was obviously pretty scary days in those times, and they had a fortified village up there, and the big drum, they reckon they could hear that drum being beaten from 10 kilometres around, right up at Tāwata, upriver, etc. You know, any hunting parties right out the back of what's our stations now and into the Kaiwhakauka, you could hear that drum being beaten. And so 4 kilometres downriver, the Ngāpuhi would have been spotted by the permanent lookout up there. They beat on the drum, all the warriors came back, and they got into the fortifications low down there on Retaruki Station there and on the Kaiwhakauka, and they were ready for the Ngāpuhi when they arrived. Ngāpuhi couldn't get into the pā sites because they were up on the top of those peninsulas with really good palisades and defence walls across the back, so their muskets were essentially useless, and they failed to get into the top pā site, so they went back downriver towards the Kaiwhakauka to murder all those guys. They couldn't get into that one either, and so the top pā site followed them down, pushed them up into the Kaiwhakauka stream, and that's where evidently they were all killed. It's the last massacre of New Zealand, you know. And then later on, if you've seen Partington's photos when he went up the river in 1903, I think it was. Alan, you were around. What year was that? Was that about right? Oh, maybe Bob, yeah. Yeah, old great uncle Bob, yeah. I said when Partington went up, you see in Partington's books the photos of the Kaiwhakauka Pass site, and you still see the whatis on the pass site and the people sitting around in 1903. So there was still, people there living there in 1903, which is quite amazing in the Kaiwhakauka. So great Māori history and stories, of course. And then turn of that, just after that, you had the riverboats coming up river, and I'll go through. I'll show you some buildings. We might have to go back through. I'll get it all wrong, but you had first off you had the European settler of James Sarsfield Lacey. He took up the first block of land in our place on the north side of the Retaruki River, and he rode his horse up from the Mangamahu Hotel that he owned down river here. So he had the Mangamahu Hotel, and he rode into our country on horseback evidently, and decided to come and take up land in there, and he sold the Mangamahu pub and moved up there and brought his family and had a few more kids and bits and pieces as he did. And that's the Lacey family that's still pretty prominent around Taumata Nui today, and we're still great friends with Peter Lacey and a lot of James Sarsfield's relatives. So they were the first ones. They got in there about 1907 to 1909, in that sort of range, and they built the first homestead, which you'll see in a minute, about 1910. So I'm going a bit backwards here, but I'll tell you about the homestead a bit more when the photos come up. So that was the first stage of European development there, I guess, and they were doing it by horseback and just coming in on some of those bridle tracks. And it was then the riverboat trade started up, and they opened up 2 riverboat landings at Retaruki, one being Lacey's Landing below James Sarsfield's site where he built his house, and the other one being the more famous landing, Wade's Landing. And Wade's Landing was one end of the Kaiwhakauka and the Mangapurua settlements, of course. So Wade's Landing ended up servicing and opening up one of the farming valleys. You pretty well know most of the history about that because you're all friends of the society, so I won't tell you too much because you'll know more than I do about that sort of history. But there was around about 14 farms in the Kaiwhakauka Valley, and up the other side road, the lesser known side road, the Tamata side road there was 6 farms up in there. And so the Wade's Landing, riverboat landing being the access to that, just above the mouth of the Kaiwhakauka there, and they opened up that road and the farms in there. So that's a bit about the European development. A few of the historic buildings in no particular order really, but I just had one of the team throw some photos on there this morning. This is the old depot building, and the depot building is 3 kilometres in a straight line sort of up the Kaiwhakauka stream, and so that was built as the supply station for all those farms in there. So that's on the junction of the main road up the Kaiwhakauka Valley that heads up to the Mangapurua Trig, and then down to the bridge to nowhere, of course, and that's on the junction with the Tamata Road. And the Tamata Road went for about 25 kilometres and wound out through Stan's Whati, which you'll see in a moment, past above there, out through what's a pretty famous hunting block out the back there, Russell and Gray's, and across the Tamata Trig, and then down into the Mangapurua Valley in the middle reaches of the valley there. And so the depot is at the start of that road. Now, pretty significant because this would be, I believe, the last remaining original building of the Kaiwhakauka and Mangapurua settlements. This is the only one left that was built end of World War I, and and so I believe that's a very, very important building, and you can't really probably pick up, but all the boards, all the original timbers are all hand split with an axe. All the nails are hand pulled, and yeah, so that's still surviving today. Now, I had my builder, Noel Shepherd, who's he's been a bit of a character around Owakuni and the Wanganui River for many years. And he came down, did a bit of work for me. He came down for an afternoon actually, and I showed him the amount of work and the old buildings and lodges I wanted to build and things. And he said, so what sort of work have you got? I said, at this stage for you, Noel, I've probably got 2 years work. And he said, he looked at me a bit sideways. I said, when you finish that, I've probably got another 2 years. And he swore and said, very lucky I bought my lunch. And but anyway, Noel worked for me for 3 years down there, but some of the jobs he used to do would be doing up these old buildings. So the depot was getting pretty dilapidated. The piles were gone, and things were getting a bit loose. The whole fireplace was gone off this this front end here. So that was all gone. The whole end of the building was all open. So what we've done is gone and we just repiled it. Noel did the door up again, did the windows up, got them all swinging, and he rebuilt the fireplace. He actually dug around, he found the old foundations where the old fireplace went, and he went and got some old Totra posts and hand split them, and got the oldest corrugated iron we could find on the place, and we've just redone it, you know. Done it up as near as most of the building is still original, but I believe that we had to maintain it to sort of look after it, and all buildings need maintenance, you know. And I realised that I could have put it straight into the Historical Building Society, but I thought that was probably a risk, because then you could be you could be under someone else's power of what you can do with those buildings, and they might not let you maintain them at all. So, but what I did really, because I don't know much about old buildings, I got one of the experts from DOC to do a report on how to do up old buildings. And he was one of the experts of New Zealand at the time. I forget the guy's name, but I've still got the reports, of course. And he did about a 40-page report on how to do up the depot building. It's pretty boring sort of reading, but a lot of it just shows, you know, a piece of wood and how to, how to do it properly. And so basically we sort of marked the pieces of wood and took a lot of photos. And so we did it up under the best possible plan available. And he did all those plans for me for free, because he really believed in these old buildings. And so, you know, we've done the best job we could of doing them up. But that's pretty significant. I think that's the only one left. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah. Was it Chris Cochran?
What's that?
Was it Chris Cochran?
That did the plan?
Conservation architect?
No, wasn't him. No, I forget the guy's name. Short wee joker. Funny looking man. Eh? Yeah. I've got his name at home. I just forget. It's been 10 years now, I suppose. Yeah. What's that? Sorry.
How long is the split Totra on the side? How long are the boards?
Those are full length. Most of them, yeah, full length. And not all of it's probably Totra. There's probably Totra, and I've had a couple of timber experts go in there. They reckon some of those shingles are actually Rimu. So, and some Rimu. So they've probably just got the straightest bits of wood they can find in 1917, and back in the days when men were men and they all knew how to use axes, you know, and just started splitting those things up. Now, I believe the roof is still original, 1917, and I asked Ivan Rustling about that, because there was someone carved their name IB, and it was Ivan Rustling. He carved his name on the door in 1940. Now, he doesn't even know if it was him, because he can't actually remember doing it, but and I thought I'll ask old Ivan about it, and Melly Dobbs about the depot. And I said, when was it re-roofed? And Ivan said, it's never been re-roofed, son. And he said, no, that's, you know, as long as he could ever remember, him and Melly Dobbs. And Ivan died out there after being there his whole life at 88, and Melly died out there just a few years ago at 94 years old. Melly, New Zealand's closest thing to a hobbit, little Melly, great little fella. I'll tell you a bit more about him later on. But yeah, so they believe that's the original roof. But that's the quality of the iron back in those days, eh? Real big, thick stuff, you know. And it grows that brown mould on top of it, and then just, you know, thing doesn't, we've re-screwed the roof down and things, but it still doesn't leak and she's good to go. And there's just a handful of, quite hoggets out there. What's that? Yeah, a few scrubby sheep. That's right. Yep. They're, just a few bush Perrendales.
It is board and batten, I take it. I'm looking from here, it is board and batten that they're cladding?
Just board, so it's just overlapping boards. So essentially the same as board and batten, but there's no difference in the size of the boards.
So you can have a big gap between them and then another one over
And another one over the top. Dead right. Yeah, like an inch or so gap, and then they just lay another one over the top. Yeah.
So the battens are a different size to the board?
No,
They're all the
same size. Yep. Yeah, pretty neat. And yeah, so I think it's just really important to look after that history. Really.
If
So,
our building goes ahead, it's something I wouldn't mind having a look at
yeah.
to do a
Yeah, no, more than welcome. Anyone, yeah.
description on
Yep. Anyone's more than welcome to come out and show you around. And it's something we probably don't do enough of, and I haven't even counted up how many historic buildings I've got on the place. But one of my ambitions is to turn Blue Duck Station into a working museum, because there's so many of these old buildings and homesteads on there, and bridges and Papa Drives, and that really they've got to be maintained, they've got to be looked after, and we turn into a 7,000 acre working museum, and encourage people and the Friends of the River come out and help me with these old buildings and things like that. They come out and do the rewiring, come out and help with the maintenance and things, and so it's been fantastic. It's turned into a big community project. So anyone who's interested, more than welcome. Go out there. Still get a few guys go and camp the night in there. They want to stay the night. My neighbour up the road, young Ryan Marshall, he goes out there camping, probably stays in there once a year. Takes his little girls out there, and Ryan was born with a pig dog following him and a bloody knife belt on. So he goes out there, catches a couple of pigs, handy, and he reckons it's real good because he can get up in the morning and hear the blue ducks calling in the stream right beside him. And he said every night around the campfire they listen to kiwis calling at night. And he said he reckons that's just gold for his girls. And he makes them carry most of the pigs out. And yeah, so it's just a neat spot, neat spot. Actually got an outfit, Kiwis for Kiwi are in there at the moment. They're conservation sort of group throughout New Zealand, and they're in there with 4 Kiwi dogs at the moment, catching kiwis in there to put radio transmitters on them and put them into Operation Nest Egg. So they've been down there for 7 days, and it's rained for 6 of them. And they can only catch kiwis in the dry, so it's a little bit of a bastard, but anyway. So another very small building, but I suppose that one actually I might just have to contradict myself. That's probably another one of the very original ones, I suppose, thinking about it, but it's not quite in the valleys. Because that's the magazine. Now, you probably all know what the magazines were for in the old days, storing explosives. And so the magazine, very small little insignificant shed, needs a whole lot more love at the moment actually, but when I bought that farm in 2006, I went and put a fence around it just so the cattle didn't push it over. Now I've got to go and rebuild the fence and do a few things really, because I always meant to do it up a little bit more, and been remiss, I haven't done much to it. But the magazine was built just above Wade's Landing, and that was simply, it was all match lined, it still got really well lined. Then they had newspaper all stuck in there as wallpaper and everything, all just to keep it completely dry. And as I take it, and it's just to store all the dynamite and keep the dynamite completely dry, which is an absolute mission, as you can imagine, down in the rainforest, down there when our lives seem to just be mud, and those early settlers must have been just dealing with that all the time too. I always think about them, working all day, going back to their tents, wet and cold, no real way to get warm and dry apart from a bit of a fire, but just must, try and dry their clothes for the next day. It's just a pretty tough outfit down there. But the magazine was to store that explosives off the riverboat from Wade's Landing, and of course to put that road in through the Kaiwhakauka, going around the bluffs, vertical above you, vertical below, with just they didn't have too many bulldozers evidently, when they started that job, so dynamite was their best friend, and so that's the magazine. Needs a bit of work and a whole lot more interpretation. And through all my buildings, something I've meant to do too, Graham, is actually go and put some signs up, and I've got a bit of writing about them and things in my cafe, and I've got stories about them. But on the fence, all these original buildings from 1917, they need a lot more. They need a lot more interpretation around them, so people understand what was going on. Stan's Foddy. Some of you, who's been to Stan's Foddy? Anyone here been out there? Yeah. Are you all welcome to come out? I'll take you out there as well. So I pulled in running late, and by the way, I've just come back from Pawanui yesterday, and then we got stuck in by a flood and down home and got the road open last night. But we've just been basing ourselves up in Coromandel for a couple of weeks because my wife's just had twins. They're 3 weeks old now, and so we've just twins at night, and they've got a great little routine going where they don't like sleeping together. One will be awake for a couple of hours, and then the other one will wake up. So she's an all-night affair. Is how my wife chooses to run it, and I've decided that she's the colonel in this operation over the last few weeks, and I just do as I'm bloody told. Because man, it's unreal trying to bring up twins. So if I fall asleep halfway through this presentation, just so you'll know, I've been getting accustomed to staying up all night at the moment. But Stan's Foddy is about 1930. So that's why it's not original as a depot. And that was built by Stan Wilson and his father, whose name escapes me, but Bob will remember because you would have known him. And they were some of the original settlers just up that Tumata Road there. They had one of the blocks in there. And this was their farmhouse. So on that sort of closer country to Whakahoro, sometimes they'd have a hut or a campsite out on their farm where they were developing their farm. And Whakahoro was a subdivided riverboat township. And there's a whole lot of sections in there, and quite a few of them built houses at Whakahoro so they could have their children and wife out there, and with the school just right there, etc. And then they would travel in during the week to their farmhouse up in the Kaiwhakauka Valley. And so this was built probably just before the road was put in to Whakahoro, because that was put in the 1930s. And so before then it was still horse up to sort of Raurimu, and that end of the valleys used to be serviced more by Raurimu and then taking the train into Taumaranui. So the first 7 farms used to do that, and the other ones would of course come up this way from sort of Coots upwards. They would come up this way and come out through Ratahi and through up to here, so to Ratahi. So the valley was pretty unique, and it was serviced, the valleys, half that Kaiwhakauka was serviced from the Ratahi, and the bottom half was serviced from Taumaranui. But Stan Wilson built that, so that's named after him. Stan's Foddy, 1930. Still original now. I pulled in just to pick up the old mate. I thought I'd bring him up too because he's a relic and he could have told a couple of stories. But Steve Carr, my mate, was the last man to live in the hut out there, and he lived out there for 3 years off and on, but all winter he'd live out there in the 1980s doing possums. And so Steve's been down involved in the Retaruki Valley since the 1980s, and it was his last man to live there. So and he used to have that hut stacked up with up to 2,000 possum skins while he was living in it at times there. And Steve would have been an interesting smelling man at times, I can tell you what. But he used to, he used to do some pretty crazy things like waddies, and he'd get a bit bush sick. So one day he reckoned he was getting a bit lonely, so he decided to walk to Whangamomana, across the Wanganui River and out the other side. Reckons he got a bit bushed and took him 3 days to get there. And but he's a real character, Steve. And Stan Wilson's grandson still comes and stays with me, and I take him out there and reminisce about his. He's actually Stan's son, and he's in his 80s now, but I've got videos of all his stories about when he was out there with his dad as a kid. Pretty neat. So that fireplace is original still, and that's what we sort of, we modelled the depot fireplace off that one. So most of that's still original, needs a whole lot of work and love. We've done it up a little bit, but it needs another bit of maintenance now. So that's the last house out of the Mangapurua Kaiwhakahuka farming settlements where anyone actually lived. And, but it was built a little bit later on, 1930. Very cool place though, and postcard, you know, from every angle really. There it is from behind, looking up, looking up the valley there towards Russell and Gray's. And slightly later photograph, and I just put a manuka fence around it to keep the cattle off, but it's not enough, needs replacing again now. What have we got here? We've got this old building here. I didn't know what it was, but this is another farm. I bought this farm in 2010 off the Rustlings family, and it was the Rustlings and the Dobbs who intermarried there. The Rustlings had the farm originally opposite Whakahoro there, over at Whirianga, what they call there on this big peninsula. They had 600 acres there, and they farmed that totally isolated off the riverboats. They walked off that in the 1940s. They didn't actually walk off because there was no roads. They rowed their boat off that block in the 1940s because it's Bert Rustling, I think, was the old fella. Because that's actually Taranaki Council. Taranaki went and put their bloody rates up, you reckon? And because in those days, in the 1940s, they wanted to build a new port at New Plymouth. And he said, a new port's no good to me, I'm not paying rates for those hooers. So he abandoned his farm and simply brought his family across the river, past the Rustlings and past the Wades, and took up land just up in the Rirariki Valley there. In a couple of spots, the Rustlings ended up with 2 farms, which are now both part of Blue Duck Station. And in the middle of their farms was a fella by the name of Mallie Dobbs, who was the son of Mr. O.B. Dobbs. And if you know, a lot of you know the Dobbs family, because some of you no doubt related to the Dobbs family. Well, Mr. O.B. Dobbs and Mrs. O.B. Dobbs had 18 children in this tiny homestead here, and I'll show you a little bit more of that homestead in a minute. But when I bought it, it was pretty derelict, as you can see. This building out the back, I said to Mallie, what's that building for? And he said that was the original post office from Whakahoro. So, and they had been using it, they'd been using it as a chook shed. With 18 kids, you've got to have chooks, you know. They had their own meat processing shed where they'd smoke their own meats, because they had 18 children in the days before there was roads. All singles, no cheating. And there's a great photo in the old Kairiiki book, maybe it's in the British Nowhere book, I don't remember, of Mr. and Mrs. O.B. Dobbs at the Rirariki Sports in the 1960s, I think it was. Could have been a little bit earlier. And someone realised that the children were all there, so they pulled them in, and because it was Mr. and Mrs. Dobbs' 65th wedding anniversary, and they had got a photo there with all 18 of their children present for their 65th wedding anniversary. Now, that's an incredible photo to have them all alive still, and some of the kids look just as old as the parents, you know. So it's a real neat photo. It's a pretty famous one, and that's all in the Tamarunui archives and bits and pieces, that photo. So that's that. I moved that post office back down the bottom, put it down by my cafe, and I'm doing it up as part of the museum. You know, I've just put a new bit of framing in it and floor in it and bits and pieces, and I'm doing the old post office up, put it back roughly near enough where it was, you know, and because being a riverboat township, it had its own post office there. It had its own school. There's actually been 2 schools at Whakahoro. The latest one is now the dock hut. So most of you guys will know what that is. But in the Kai Whakauka and the Mangapurua, it's what's called a Papa Drive. And so that's how they diverted the streams under the roads to put the roads in the old days there. Now, I've found quite a lot of them all through the valleys. And amazing bit of history. I asked Mallie Dobbs about them, and Hilary Dobbs, and Ivan Rustling, and any old person that I could find and ask about the Papa Drives. But it's one of the things I've never been able to get a lot of information on, you know, just to find the stories. The only thing is, Ivan told me that he reckoned they were built by a Dutchman who was a specialist in underground rock construction. He reckons Ivan's dad told him that the Dutchman used to stay out in the bush there and he had a caravan. He'd drag the caravan in there and live in his caravan right beside the Papa Drive, and he'd work largely on his own and build these big tunnels through the rock to divert the streams through. And because when you get into those Papa Drives, and I've climbed through heaps of them, I've probably found 10, I guess. When you climb through them and you see all the hand pick marks, you just can't help shake your head about how tough and tenacious those old buggers were doing that sort of work, Because you know that, he could have done a little bit of blasting in there, but it would have been very delicate, and they all had to be shaped with a pick. And I asked all the old people, how long did it take to build a Papa Drive? Because some of those things are 40 metres long. And it's just absolutely amazing. And when you see the shape, a lot of the shape all around the tops and things is all still perfectly. Yep. Some of them are round. I've found some round ones. The one further up the Kaifok is wide and round for some reason, but these ones are really really oval, and most of them are oval. And the one I've never actually had any information on, but you guys would have all seen it, and it took me a while to realise what it was, but it's the first stream crossing as you get off the Mangapurua landing and head up towards the bridge to nowhere. And you look at that big channel around the side, well, that's an open drive, eh? And you don't really slow down and look at it much, but it's that's the only one I've seen that's actually an open top drive, and is there, yeah, yep, open one, yep, yeah. So they obviously used to do the odd open one as well, and yeah. But it's a really good one just off the Mangapurua landing there, and it's, quite an obvious one to show people and tell them all about it. Yeah, a lot of them have, eh? Yeah. Yep. This one's almost straight, and the couple after that almost straight. But some of the ones, the Mangapurua Valley up in there, that runs up to the Morinui Trig, just by the Mangapurua Trig there. There's quite a few up that valley as well. And some really spectacular ones, eh?
One of the best ones, Dan, and talking about the Papa Drive, was right next to Coots' hut. And Doc took me down there and said, oh look, the Papa Drive's fallen in, you need to do something about this, Dave. And I had a look at it, and what they've done is they've done a Papa Drive, and there was a lot of timber being felled in the day, and that used to block up all the time, and so they dug another channel above it, came in through, and then dropped in on top of that one behind the entranceway.
Big square hole.
And it's just a dead, perfectly square hole into the original Papa Drive.
Jesus.
But this one didn't have enough cover, and
Yep.
it's fallen in over time. And I just said, nah, you've got to leave that, because it's bloody special, really. Because
Yeah.
a lot of them, they were dug like that, so they had plenty of scope to take the water, and they did get blocked up.
Yeah. This bugger doesn't usually fail, but it's actually failed twice in the last 12 months. But these are extreme storms we're dealing with, and I'll show you a bit of that damage lately. But this has blocked up a couple of times in the last 12 months, and like just hundreds and hundreds of mils of rain overnight. And yeah, we thought we'd lost it just over 12 months ago. We came through and the whole valley had gone, but just luckily the rock face with the Papa Drive had just hung on, and yeah. But these are and full of cave wetters too. I get in the middle of them, and just this one's just got hundreds and hundreds of cave wetters, nests of them in there, and you get in and you go through them at night, full of glowworms. A lot of native bats hang around this one, so pretty special sort of stuff.
It's a good place to store food as well.
Yeah.
It's always cool.
Yeah. Well, they used to make a lot of Papa fridges in there, evidently, in the old days, eh? Back on the south side of the house, and yeah. So there's the Dobbs old homestead from another angle there, and that's that'll be about 2010 there, and they're pretty that 2010. So that would have been built just after Lacey homestead, what I'll tell you in a minute. So this is the second oldest homestead in our valley, and I've started doing it up. She's a big old job. We've done it up inside, moved the wife and kids in there, but yeah, there's a lot more to do now. Didn't learn any lessons, and I've bred some more kids. I'm going to have to extend a little bit too, probably. Either that or move out. Hey?
The chook house.
Yeah, that's it. I might bring the chook house back. But so no, I'll probably have to extend the old homestead or put another couple of rooms on it somehow, but I'll try and get the right sort of architect to do it up and make it still, you know, keep it largely in its same character, but maybe build another wing off to the left-hand side of it. And yeah, no more bloody kids, I can tell you that. 4 kids, that's enough. I'm not going to follow in Mr. That's what their wife said to me. She said, we're going to have to extend this house now, 4 kids. I said, well, history would tell you we don't, because Mr. O.B. Dobbs and Mrs. O.B. Dobbs had 18 kids in that house, and didn't worry them, honey. But she's got a... Don't worry, Mrs. has got a few answers to me when I come up with arguments like that. I can't repeat them here. But yeah, a fascinating story, the Dobbs family, and real neat talking to Melly, who lived next door. He built his little house next door in 1970, and he lived out his whole life there. Even after I bought the farm, he just stayed in the house next door. And the story's fantastic, you know, like, and Melly died, what, 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. But what he saw in his life, through to what society's like when he died, was just mind-blowing, and he didn't even begin to understand it really, and didn't want to. But Melly was a recluse, you know, there's no question about it. He went to Auckland once, didn't like it. He was going to go to Wellington one time, and he got to Palmerston North, the side of the road was too busy, turned his Valiant ute around and drove home. So he never ever got to see Wellington in his 94 years, old Melly. But he was, and he was a bachelor his whole life. Hell of a sense of humour on him. And but yeah, talking to Melly about what it was like in the old days, and cutting the bush with axes, and you know how his dad used to just order boxes of axe heads. You know, they'd get a big box of high-test axe heads, and the boys' job be put all the heads in, and they literally cut that farm themselves, and that's probably why they had 18 kids, eh? You know, to cut that farm out of bush. And then Hillary, his little sister, who just died a couple of years after he did their... Hillary tells fantastic stories too about their annual trip to town from down there. And they'd go by horse and cart from the bottom of the Rederoki Valley up through the Kaitiiki to Raurimu, to the train, and then they'd take the train into Tamaranui, and they'd stay the night at the hotel, and the kids would all get one, if it was been a good year, they'd get 1 shilling spending money each, and they'd stay the night in there, do whatever they had to do, maybe if anyone had to go to the dentist or anything, and in the morning she was back on the train, back to Raurimu and back down the valley for another year. And Hillary used to tell me about the week leading up to going to town. She said she'd start to not be able to sleep. She'd start getting so excited about going to Tamaranui for the annual trip. And just, you know, the night before town, she said she couldn't sleep. She'd be a mess, jittering. And she used to go into town, and I'm not much into clothing and fashion and too much, but she used to say her shilling, she'd go straight to the fashion shops of Tamaranui, and she'd get magazines and look around what people were wearing, things around the place, and what was the latest fashions. And she would then go and buy a pattern and buy some material that she chose. So she'd go home after her annual trip and she'd make herself 1 dress a year, and that's what her shilling would go and do. A bit of material and a pattern, and go home and make herself a dress, and that was Hillary's year out, you know. And she was still there when we were bringing thousands of tourists down the valley, and they're all, you know, those fellas, I think if you'd cut the internet off and took their mobile phones away, I don't know if they'd survive 2 days, you know. They're just so connected to the world and everything about them now, and we're all, you know, I'm the same, you know. If you can't do all your internet banking, pay all your bills, contact everyone you want to do, and do all your marketing on your cell phone in half an hour, you know, you feel like your throat's been cut nowadays. But, and you know, so from the time when they were kids to the time when they left the valley, the changes were just incredible, you know. And one fault we never did, we didn't video record those stories enough. But I mean, I suppose we've still got them all in our heads. And the neat thing is, O.B. Dobbs' granddaughter now is, she's still a good friend, Val Stratford, still lives down the valley, and she's now running a gardening crew around my lodges and helping me tidy up the old buildings and things. And Val loves the history too. I don't know why she's not here today, but she's got right involved with the Mangapurua Society there at the moment. She's volunteering for them and helping out. So it's, Val's great for some of the old stories too. We wander around and go and look at the old sites, and she goes, "That's right, Granddad told me this," and there's so much knowledge. It's fantastic. So we'll do that old homestead up. Might have to put another room on it. But, yeah, OB Dobbs. There's the old Lacey homestead. So, and that has been slightly done up, but we tried to keep it in pretty much in character of what it was. But the old's extended it a little bit and put the odd extra deck on it there. But that's in the best location, looking up and down the Wanganui River, of course, and right at the bottom. And James Sarsfield Lacey, a lot of stories about him. Evidently, a few people reckon he's still there. I'm not a big believer in ghosts unless I'll only start believing when I finally see one. But some people I know and trust and some pretty hard men swear that they've seen him there. And Peter Lacey being one of them, But Peter does admit, and there's Peter's cousin, old Tom Mowat from here too, and Tom's another institution. But Peter reckons he's probably used to have a few too many whiskies when he did used to see him. But we've actually had other people down there see this old man walking around through the night with a big white goatee beard, and get up in the morning and say, "Was there an old man with a big white goatee beard around here last night?" And James Sarsfield Lacey was a big prominent old man with white hair and a white goatee beard. And pretty hard man in a lot of ways from all the stories. But yeah, great to be still involved with his family and have them as good friends down there. So the Lacey homestead and neat place. It's been abandoned a couple of times. When we bought the place, when my parents bought that place in 1993, there were sheep living in the homestead. It was one of the first jobs was getting shovels and shovel out all of the sheep manure, and then they, like me, they looked long and hard whether you start doing these old buildings up or whether you put the bulldozer through it and build something new, because that's a hell of a lot simpler and you get a better result because it's, you know all the reasons. But Mum decided probably pretty quickly that, no, it's history, and those homesteads are the original homesteads, and they've got so many stories. So with that and the old Dobbs homestead, we choose to do them up and make them, keep the character, but make them, bring them into the modern era. That's a Lacey suspension bridge there. So most of you that have been down there will be well aware of that. That was built in the late 40s, I believe, and there's amazing photos around of the floods coming right up to the bridge. You can't really see too well in there. The flood of 1950 bent the bridge, and it's still buckled to this day. Yeah, no, it has got a bend. It's not just, they can't really tell in the photo, but you probably tell in the next one that was what it was like in March this year. So, yeah, floods are part of life down there, and they seem to be, as Graham said before, we still get floods nowadays that are fairly debilitating for business, tourism, farming, and honey, and that's our three main things down there. We've got lodges on the place now. We're big in tourism. We've got 10,000 guests a year coming down to see us now, one way, shape or form, and go horse riding or hunting or come canoeing the river or whatever they want to do. And we have these floods that wash out bridges and block roads, and they're a real pain. But we've got diggers today, which are just, they're a game changer, of course. We've got helicopters, bulldozers, all the things that those days, if they had floods like this, the work just would have been absolutely incredible. That's one of the main reasons why there's not people farming in the Mangapurua and Kaiwhakuuki anymore, of course. So that was on March 7th or 8th or whatever, and probably 200 and odd mils of rain overnight. But 242, Alan reckons, is probably about right overnight, and some areas would have been more and some would have been less, but it's the culverts on the road couldn't handle it and simply washed the ends of the bridge out. That took a month to fix.
How did you fix the end of it?
Yeah, it's hard case, but they got about 8 engineers in, and then they all had big debates, and it took a long time to get started, as it does with these bloody engineers, because they can't decide who's in charge and who's right and who's wrong, and no one wants to take responsibility, and so in the end they sent a report, what to do, but all these engineering reports and all the money spent, and the fellow who did all the decisions and actually made most of the decisions, did the work, was the excavator driver, because they just gave him a report, told him what to do, and honestly, that fella could have done it without the engineers' reports and would have done just as good a job. So it's just, it's the bureaucracy of today, you know. That guy knew what he was doing, knew how to do it. He didn't need an engineer to tell him. But they sent 350 tonnes of rocks down, and he just placed them all in there, dug it all out, of course, as he would do, get all the soft stuff away, put 350 tonnes of rock or more in there, and has just built it all up and done a beautiful job. But then we pointed out to the engineers, and they hadn't even seen it. After 8 engineer reports, they hadn't seen the whole bridge had shifted and twisted again, and you could quite easily see, but somehow 8 engineering reports didn't see that's shifted on the ropes and things. So now they've had to redecide. They don't know if it could actually carry the 10-tonne weight limit they've been saying it can carry, and they still haven't decided that, so we're probably technically not allowed to take trucks over it at the moment, or diggers or tractors, or so, you know, cattle. Meant to be TB testing this week, but I'm probably not going to run a mob of cattle over it because they're saying, oh, it probably has weakened. Yeah, well, it's, yeah, fun and games, but that's life. So that's kind of how they fixed it, look. But, you know, and so the hard case thing is, before the job and while the digger drivers were there, engineers didn't even come and see him. They just, away he goes, just rip in and do it. Yeah. But it's, you know, he's done a very good job. A lot of rocks and yeah, miles away. But they trucked them all in. Yeah, many truckloads. What quarry would they come from, Dave? Right, yeah. So that's some of the country after March this year. So, as some of you probably saw it, but I put some of that stuff up on our social media page for Blue Duck Station, and next thing it's all over the news, and I'm getting advice from all over New Zealand, keyboard warriors, and you should just plant trees on that land and wouldn't have slipped and all that sort of thing, and which is all fine, and I don't mind the debate at all, you know. But there's a lot of that country's actually got a surprising amount of reversion in it, and we are trying to revert the gully bottoms and a lot of the steeper stuff. We are letting it go into scrub, and so I put up a few photos afterwards, but the slips there are all very small in comparison to the ones in the virgin bush of the Wanganui National Park. So I went and put some of those videos up, because virgin bush, thousands of years old, has come down in huge ways as well. And it's not just pastoral farming, that's what I'm saying, and we're fully aware that a lot of our land is reasonably unsustainable and we should be planting more trees, and we are. But when you get a downpour like 250 mils of rain overnight, the virgin bush couldn't handle it either. And if you haven't been down on the jet boat and had a look at it, like some of you have, I took Alan and crew out the other day and showed them those slips. They're bloody massive, eh? Yeah, some of the ones in the virgin native are much bigger than the ones in the past, you know. And yep, from the top of the ridge to the Wanganui River. And what's that? Yep. Back to the solid papa and remus and ratas and amount of bloody totara that come down in that Wanganui River. Actually blocked the Wanganui River. And then the river built up and pushed a few channels through it. But I haven't seen it since for a month, but it was opening up, you know. It was opening up and washing more tawas out all the time, every flood that comes through. And we've had 2 or 3 floods since then. So, but yeah, so she's it's challenging now, like in farming wise and tourism wise. It's challenging now like it was in those days. But yeah, we've certainly got a whole lot of other options that those people didn't have. Diversified income and all that sort of thing. But there's a little bit of a look of, it's not one of the better photos, but I didn't put this presentation together, so I can't complain. But there's one, sort of a little bit of a look out of a bush stream, and that's largely virgin bush there. And the slips are coming straight down out of the virgin, and my bike's just parked on, you can see the state of the stream. It's usually a tiny stream, goes through a, you know, whatever it is, 350, 400 millimetre culvert, never a problem. Just a tiny little trickle out of the bush. But in that flood, that whole stream is now bloody 50 metres wide and scoured out to the rocks all the way through. And I suppose the thing with those big slips in the virgin native, you see those scars, and they'll last hundreds of years when it goes back. Someone said it goes back to the bare rock, to the bare papa. It takes a long time for that to recover, or, you know, to grow bush again. and we aren't seeing the scars from 100 years ago. So these floods probably, where it was on the Wanganui River, that's the biggest flood I would say in 100 years or more, because there's no scarring like that of that sort of degree on that Wanganui River like that. And that's not too dissimilar to that flood that hit down by and just about took out the bridge to nowhere. When was that? 2015, when that big one down there, eh?
Yeah, I talked about that last night, Brendan.
And when the slip came down, only 20 metres and just missed the bridge, which was a pretty close thing.
Ed Spivey was talking about that last night.
Yep.
All the mamakus disappeared.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty major events, and that was just, we didn't get any of that in 2015, it was just down below us, but we certainly got a bit of this one. And this one really, this storm was probably 10 kilometres wide and 20 kilometres long. That's where the damage is. There's a bit of peripheral damage off the sides, but the eye of the storm is just that sort of size, There's only four farms that were really hammered, and we were two of them. That was when I walked out my front door in the morning and thought, oh yeah, this is a bit interesting. And I knew the river had come up over this tiny stream had come up over the road in the night. And I walked out and took that on my phone and just said put it on Blue Duck Station Facebook, fellas, we've got a bit of a flood. Guests, if you're coming in, you're probably not going to get in today, and let everyone know. We had no phones or anything, but we had internet. Put it on there. Next thing, that's on all over the news. And then so my guest got in touch about 3 weeks later and said, oh, it was on BBC News as well. So it must have been a very quiet news day that day around the world. It was on BBC News, But, we get these big floods. There is silver linings. If you couldn't pay to have an advert on BBC News, could you? So there's silver linings. We won't run out of tar with firewood for a while. That's one of my staff little cleaning cars, and they were trying to go between houses to go and have a dinner at one of the other staff houses, and thought they could just drive through the water. Bloody French girls, I'll tell you what. Anyway, and the clean-up, that's in the virgin bush as well, just around the Kaiwhakuka. Actually, that's right on the confluence of the Wanganui River, and big job, but there's so much loose stuff around that it's every time it rains now, it'll be coming down for another 12 months yet. That's it, yeah. Sometimes you've got to go back to just the way it was, that's a bit about tourism down there. I guess the main income, hard case, when I started Blue Duck Station there in 2005, set up the first lodge, we were all farming, 100% farming income, and now 13 years later, the biggest product comes off my land is value-wise, is Manuka honey. That's the single biggest value product that comes out of the bottom of that valley now, at a wholesale rate at the farm gate of between $20 and $60 a kilogram, depending on what grade, and MPI's stuffed all that up at the moment, as you're probably aware if you've got anything to do with honey. But sheep and beef is a minor part of what we're doing now. And I wouldn't have thought it would have changed so quickly, but honey's the number one product coming off my land. And we could easily produce 20 to 40,000 kilograms of Manuka honey off our station per year. You times that at 40, 50 bucks a kilo, wholesale rate at the farm gate, and it's on a good year, you can blow everything else out of the water with honey. Huge. Tourism's now number 2. 10,000 guests a year visiting our station. 10,000 guests and showing them around or selling them a cup of coffee or a jet boat ride is a little bit more profitable than trying to produce 10,000 lambs off that station nowadays. And as you know, the story with wool at the moment, it's a pretty sad sort of a story really, but that's what, the main income of the Mangapurua Valley ever was on the 1 or 2 good years they ever had with wool farming. Wool was the main income, and now it's an absolute byproduct, which is a sad thing. But yeah, honey's our number 1, tourism's number 2, and sheep, beef, wool and venison combined is a number 3. Very important. We all like food. Most of us like to eat every day, but it's only just a part of what we do, and that's going to be true for New Zealand as well. And so it's just having a diversified sort of portfolio, and So my passion really is, a lot of it is around, it's about, passionate about New Zealand really, and passionate about looking after New Zealand, how we make our money, how we tell our stories, all sorts of things. So, and I get to talk to a lot of people down on the station about what they care about and tell a lot of stories. So I decided I'm going to just shoot off over the world and become a bit more worldly about what New Zealand should be doing with its time and what New Zealand's plan should be. So I've just completed a Nuffield Scholarship, which is basically, in a nutshell, it's an international scholarship, comes out of the UK, and it's about how to feed the world better food more sustainably, and how agriculture is going to be part of global solutions rather than global problems, because farming's got a lot to bloody answer for on what we've done to the planet, as we weren't farmers 14,000 years ago. We're all hunter-gatherers, you know. And by that I don't mean that it's farmers. See, people point the finger at farmers and say, you bastards should be cleaning up the world and you should be doing this and you should be doing that. You're just as culpable if you live in a city. So guarantee you eat food every day. And agriculture's allowed cities to form. So anyway, I'm just pretty passionate about New Zealand getting it right and looking after New Zealand. And that's looking after the stories of places like the Mangapurua and the Kaiwhoku is a very big part of it. Our history's huge. And but what's more important than our history is our future. And so that's why we're trying to turn Blue Duck Station into a conservation project. It's no bloody good having it called Blue Duck Station if the blue ducks don't survive. Things like blue ducks, hugely important for New Zealand's history, so future, I mean. And so anyway, yeah, we've got, you just have a look at this. This is a bit of an old map here, but we're trying to put traps all over the place, trying to do predator control, habitat improvement, and hopefully have a place where the blue ducks can survive and thrive, and the kiwis and the bats and all that. And we can tie that in with the history of the place, with the abandoned farms and the tourism we're doing. But very much about looking after New Zealand. So that's why I've done the Nuffield Scholarship, try to travel the world and see what the world wants in the future. And it's a very, very interesting world at the moment. We think that the technological advances have changed from Mallee Dobbs' day till now are going to be nothing compared to what our children are going to see in the future. And as that really wise guy said 100 years ago in 1903, everything of significance that can be invented has already been invented. Very wise man said that in 1903, you know, and that was just before motor cars, telephones, televisions, internet, nuclear bombs, you name it. But we're only 3% down the road of technology as of today. You know, you think about what we've got, what we are now, 10 years' time, she's going to be a bloody interesting world. Pretty cool to be part of it. Good. But so you know, I've just done that scholarship. Fascinating how the world's changing and where it's going to be. It blows my mind, and I can't believe what's coming, really. But I tell you what, it's coming. There's no question about that. But the best thing we can do is look after New Zealand and try and make this a paradise for ourselves, our children, our grandchildren, because we're pretty lucky to have this place way down the bottom of the South Pacific, where we've got plenty of resources, and so the best thing is to look after it. And to me, nature's first. Mother Nature's the most bloody important thing we got. But so you know, we've got traps all over the place. You guys know what that is? Most of you are. The A24 sort of technology. In this 5 years' time, this will be old technology. But at the moment, they're pretty cool things. Killing rats and stoats, self-setting traps, powered by gas. You know, pretty cool lures that are being developed that are super lures to attract rats and bits and pieces. We bought rats here, we bought stoats here, cats, etc. They're a pain in the ass. Good technology, and I see $181 million announced in the budget 2 days ago for extra conservation spending. It's a pretty exciting time to be a New Zealander. That's pretty cool. But very much about the conservation, and yeah, very much about the history as well. You know, like we can't have a good country if we don't remember our history. So that's all very good. What else have I got there? Not a lot. I bought a few books. If any of you guys want, just in case anyone hasn't got Bridge to Nowhere books, bought a couple of the old man's books he's written. But there's not. I think most places have run out of Bridge to Nowhere books now. But we'll talk. I think I might have bought the last of them, but I did buy 2 boxes off the Wanganui Chronicle recently.
Okay.
Yeah, I bought 100 books anyway off the Chronicle last year, and I sell quite a few down at the cafe, but just in case anyone wanted them, those I sell them for $30 each, but you're very negotiable, I could care less really. Pay me what you want. Yeah, nothing much else. I bought this book along just as a I think a hard case story. These things are fate. But my parents were farming on the western bays of Lake Taupō up until 1993 on what's now become a bit of a famous farm because some guys called the Crafer brothers ended up owning it after that guy who owned Brian, who owned Ongaroo Transport. Brian Adams. He bought it off my parents in 93. My parents bought Retaruki Station. And then the Crafer brothers ended up owning it anyway as one of those 21 dairy farms they had. Yeah, sad use for the Western Bays of Lake Taupo, that I can tell you, went, under that sort of management, you know, I think. But remember, the first time we drove down the Retaruki Valley, I just loved it. I just thought, this is it, you know. I liked the Western Bays of Lake Taupo as a kid as well, but going down that Retaruki Valley, there's, you know, into that country, it's got something about it, you know. The valleys close in, but big long bush valleys and adventure and hunting and history, and I reckon you can feel it. You know, you go out to the depot, you go out to those places, you can feel it out there, you know. And so I told the olds, you got to buy it. They said, we haven't even got to the station yet. I said, oh, you got to buy it. This is it. And it was. Because we nearly bought Mangapurua Station a couple of years beforehand. And the old man got the finance approved just, and he rung up and it had been sold to Peter Buckland bought it, I think, then. He beat the old man to it by 2 days. And so I was gutted with that as a kid. I was about, I don't know, 17 or something. We missed out on Mangapurua Station. And I'd loved that. What's that, Bob?
Neighbouring block to where they are.
Mangapurua Station's off the back, yeah. It's owned by Gavin Jordan now. And a couple of years before we bought Retaruki Station, Peter Buckland bought the back of Retaruki Station, the back 1,300 acres, and added it to Mangapurua Station. And then he sold off the Waipahi, which is a pretty mongrel valley that runs down to the Wanganui River again. But I went home to the Western Bays to help the olds pack the house up. Very excited about the shift down there where wild pigs were running all over the place like fleas on a camel, and you know, all the things I'd dreamed about as a kid. And I saw an avid book of the New Zealand Outdoors, a reader of hunting books and things, and I saw this book falling down behind the old lady's bookshelf I'd never seen, and it was Gun in the Hills by Greg Kelly. And I thought I hadn't seen that hunting book, and I've read every hunting book I could find as a kid. And so I was just meant to be packing up bookshelves, and I ended up flicking through this and looking through it, and we were just packing the boxes, loading the trucks and cars and moving down to Retaruki Station. I flicked through it, opened it straight up, and lo and behold, I just flicked it open. There was just a little picture, just a little old picture, but straight away I thought, geez, I recognise that country. Straight away, open it up, and it's Grand Country for Pheasant on the lower Retaruki River in the central King Country, and it's a photo of Lacey's homestead. And we were moving there that day, you know, and I thought, well, that's bloody fate, isn't it? That's it. You'll be carrying me out of there in a box. So, yeah, that's it, you know, true story. As true as anything you'll get out of me anyway. So, anyway, yeah, the Nuffield Scholarship, well, as I said, you know, in the words of wise man like Fred Dagg many years ago, we've got places, I went around India, 1.4 billion people, and just mind-blowing. And when Fred Dagg said many years ago, we don't know how lucky we are, you get to the middle of India, and the cities like that, and they're trying to keep that clean and green. And Fred Dagg was a very wise man. So that's the story. Keep it up, get involved in the history, and thank you very much. Any questions? Go and see my spokesman, Alan Donald, please. Yeah. Good as.